This is Lisa. We're going to finish up our section on inequalities today. Solving the following inequalities. We're going to talk about how to solve inequalities with decimals and with fractions. So to solve an inequality with decimals, you're going to go through the same steps that we did in 11.2. Identify each side of your inequality. We want to get our like terms together, so all the x terms on one side. Here I have minus 0.2x. I'm going to do plus 0.2x on the left and plus 0.2x on the right to get all of my x terms together. Minus 0.2x plus 0.2x is 0, so we have 1.3 is less than. Now, if you have a hard time with decimals, you can do the coefficients on your calculator. 0.5 plus 0.2 should give you 0.7x minus 0.1. Got all my x terms on the right. I'm going to move my numbers to the right, to the left, so 0.1 I need to add to both sides. And when I add that, I get 1.4 is less than 0.7x. And now I do the same thing that I would normally do. I divide to get the x by itself. I'm dividing by a positive, so my inequality sign stays the same. And again, if you're not sure how to divide those decimals, pull out your calculator. I get 2 is less than 0.7, those cancel. 2 is less than x. Now when we solve our inequalities, we still need to do our number line. Negative infinity to infinity. And I've got to look at my inequality. 2 is less than. 2 is on the little side, so x is on the big side. The big side always goes to the right, so we're going to the right of 2. And at 2, we're going to use a parenthesis because it's strictly less than. So I have parentheses at 2, comma, I go out to infinity, and always with infinity, I use a parenthesis. Now, the only time that your answer should contain decimals is when the original problem contained at least one decimal. When you're doing the online homework, you will frequently see underneath the answer box, it'll tell you to write your answer as a fraction or an integer. So make sure that if you're typing in a decimal that that type of answer is allowed. In example number 2, we have an inequality with fractions in it. Now, if it helps you write everything with a fraction, we have 2/3 x plus 9 over 1 is greater than or equal to 1/6 x minus 3 over 1. Just like with our equations, we want to find the lowest common denominator, or any denominator, any common denominator, and that's what we're going to multiply all of our terms by. When I look at my fractions, I have 3, 1, and 6. My lowest common denominator is 6. I'm going to multiply every term. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to multiply all of those by 6, or 6 over 1. And we can reduce. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 2 times 2x is 4x. All we have left in the denominator is 1, so we don't have to write it down. Plus 9 times 6 is 54 over 1, or just plain 54, is greater than or equal to 6 over 6 cancels, leaving us with x minus 6 times 3 is 18. Now that we've cleared our fractions, we're going to get all of our x's on the same side, so subtract x from each side of the equation. 3x plus 54 is greater than or equal to negative 18. I want all my numbers on the same side, so I'm going to subtract 54 from both sides. which leaves me with 3x is greater than or equal to negative 72. And to get x by itself, we're going to divide each side by 3. Again, this is a positive 3, so we don't have to worry about changing the direction of the inequality sign. We get x is greater than or equal to negative 24. When I draw my number line, thinking negative 24 is a pretty big number, I'm going to count off in 12. So 0, 12, 24, negative 12, negative 24, negative 36. I want x to be, it's on the big side of the inequality, so we've got a shade to the right of 24, of negative 24. And it can be equal to, based on our inequality sign, so we're going to do the equal to part is a square bracket at negative 24. So my final interval will have a bracket at negative 24, goes out towards the right to infinity, always a parenthesis at infinity. Now if you want to check this, let me go back and copy the original inequality. You can write it down again in your book. I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to say if I want to check it, I want to pick a number that's bigger than 24. Pick any number on your number line, say 12, and then plug that in. 2/3 times 12 plus 9, is that greater than or equal to 1/6 of 12 minus 3? You can pull your calculator out to do this, or you can do it by hand. Let's see, 3 goes into 12 4 times. I get 8 plus 9 is 17. 6 goes into 12 twice. I get negative 1. Is 17 greater than or equal to negative 1? The answer is yes, so it does check. It helps me to verify that I do have the correct graph and I do have the correct interval. Next, we're going to talk about three-part inequalities. Three-part inequalities are inequalities that have two inequality signs. So when you look at an inequality, 3 is less than x is less than or equal to 4. Think about when we try to think about what sides we have. Here, we don't just have sides, we have three parts. We have the stuff that's on the left of the inequalities, the stuff that's in the middle of our two inequality signs, and the stuff that's on the right-hand side of our inequality. So those are the three parts that we talk about, the left, the middle, and the right. When we give our answer to a three-part inequality, we're going to draw our number line and label some of our numbers on the number line. And now when I look at the inequality, negative 2 is less than x is less than 3. X is in the middle, so we're going to shade in the middle of negative 2 and 3. So if I shade in between negative 2 and 3, then I look at my inequality signs. The inequality sign close to the negative 2 is a less than, so I need to use a parenthesis at negative 2. And the inequality sign closest to the 3 is a less than, so I use a parenthesis there. And my interval will be parenthesis negative 2, comma 3 with a parenthesis. Now sometimes you will have one parenthesis and one bracket, or other times you will have two brackets. You've got to look at the inequality signs to determine which symbols you're going to be using. So let's do a second example. Again, we're going to draw our number line. I have 5 and I have 2. So my x is in between those two numbers. I need to shade in between 5 and 2 on my number line. When I look at where do my brackets and parentheses go, 5 is greater than or equal to. It can be equal to, we're going to use a bracket at 5. So here's my bracket. At 2, when I look at my inequality, we're greater than 2. Greater than means we're going to use a parenthesis at that end of the shading. So we have a parenthesis at 2, comma, 5 with a square bracket, and there's our interval. Now we need to solve our inequalities. I don't just have x by itself in the middle, so I want to think about getting x by itself. I have 3x minus 4, so addition property comes first, but this time I have 3 parts. Whatever I do in the middle, I have to do on the right and on the left. When you have a 3-part inequality, you have to do everything 3 times. We want to do all 3 of the parts the same. So negative 7 plus 4 is negative 3, is less than 3x, is less than or equal to 8 plus 4 is 12. To get x by itself in the middle, we then divide by 3. Negative 3 over 3 is negative 1, is less than x, is less than or equal to 4. I have x by itself in the middle. Now I can draw my graph. And I always start, with one number to the left and one number to the right of where I want my final answer to be. Again, you can do units of 5 or units of 2, whatever works out best for that particular problem. Here we have x is in between negative 1 and 4, so we're shading in between negative 1 and 4. At negative 1, less than is a parenthesis. At 4, we have less than or equal to. Equal to means we're going to use that square bracket. And when I write my interval, parenthesis at negative 1 to 4 with a bracket. If you always do the graph first, then your interval will always be in the correct order. We always want the smaller numbers or the more negative numbers on the left, and the positive numbers or the bigger numbers on the right. Let's do another example. Example number 4. Here we're starting off with a fraction. How do we clear a fraction? We multiply every part of our inequality by the common denominator. I don't have a whole lot of room here, so I'm going to rewrite my inequality, leaving me with a little bit more space in the middle. So we said we're going to multiply every term, every part of our inequality by the common denominator, which in this case we only have 1, so our common denominator is 2. Or where you have fractions, if you like, you can do it 2 over 1. My fractions will cancel. And on each side or each part of my inequality now, I have negative 20 is less than or equal to 1 minus 3x is less than or equal to negative 4. Use your addition property first. I need to move the 1 out from the middle, so I'm going to subtract 1. Do it on the right and on the left, and I get negative 21 is less than or equal to negative 3x is less than or equal to negative 5. Still need to get that x by itself in the middle, so my multiplication property says I can divide everything by negative 3. When I divide everything by negative 3, I'm dividing by a negative, so I have to change the direction of my inequality signs. And here I'm going to get negative 21 over negative 3 is 7. Get x by itself in the middle. And negative over negative makes this positive, but 5/3 I can't reduce. What I can do is I can do 5 divided by 3 on my calculator, and it will tell me it's 1.6667. So I'll know approximately where it is on my number line. My number line. Negative infinity to infinity. Negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here I'm shading in between 7 and 1.667. So 1.667 is somewhere between 1 and 2. Remember though, in most of these problems, you're going to be required to answer in fraction form. So on my number line, I put a mark where that would go and call it 5/3, and I'm going to shade between 5/3 and 7. At 7, we're going to use a square bracket. It can be equal to. At 5/3, oops, if I look at the inequality sign there, I'm using a square bracket. It can be equal to. So my answer as an interval, I have a square bracket at 5/3, comma, at 7, I have a square bracket as well. And that concludes our section on solving inequalities. This is Lisa, and you are at the end of your module as well, so when you finish your homework and your quiz, you'll be ready for the pre-test on Module 11. Have a great day.